I feel like we're in a really rough patch of Marvel at the moment, especially with the MCU. I know Deadpool and Wolverine's coming out pretty soon, and I am very keen for that. But I kind of wanted to take a look at the good old days. And it's really weird to say that, the good old days for Marvel, the MCU. I am like 24 years old. I should not be saying the good old days. But anyway, this is the Infinity Saga, and I wanted to tier list the movies. So right off the bat, we've got Guardians of the Galaxy. And I'm going to put this straight into great tier. It is an awesome ensemble cast. It is a hilarious movie, and it's got an awesome soundtrack with it as well. And I think that's all the key ingredients you need for a great movie. It's got awesome characters too, with Drax, with Groot, with Rocket, Star-Lord, Gamora as well. They are all great characters on their own, and I think together they just make an awesome team. Next up, Ant-Man and the Wasp. So this is the second Ant-Man movie, and I've got to say this was like a movie they used to just kind of progress the entire MCU timeline story, the overall overarching story further. This doesn't really stand on its own 2 feet as a single movie, I think, and for that reason I'm going to go bad tier. Yeah, and it's not very memorable either. To be honest, I couldn't tell you what it was about other than the fact of getting Scott into the Tinyverse or whatever they decided to call it, so that he could wake up 5 years later when the snap happens. That was the only reason that this movie happened, from what I remember. Next up, Civil War. This is going in great tier as well. I would not put it above Guardians of the Galaxy, just because I think Guardians was like a one-of-a-kind movie at the time. And Civil War, we've kind of already seen these characters before, especially Iron Man and Cap and all the rest. They've been in the Avengers movies. They've been in the MCU for a while. And that's why I'd put Guardians above it. But Civil War, it's great on its own 2 feet as well. It pitted our favorite superheroes together. It adapted one of the best comic book storylines of all time into an awesome movie as well. And it really made you feel for Tony and Steve at the same time. So it was hard to pick a side, but yeah, they both did a great job. Next up, we've got, is this Winter Soldier? That's the one. That's going in best tier, man. That is going in the best tier. This is a movie that really took itself seriously. It kind of took itself outside of the whole superhero genre. It kind of did away with the superhero shtick. It was an awesome action movie that stands on its own 2 feet. I think it's got some awesome choreography and fight scenes in it as well. It's got an awesome storyline with the kind of internal struggle with S.H.I.E.L.D. and having some informants. And yeah, I think Steve, Natasha Romanoff, and Nick Fury are all awesome in the movie. They're all portrayed very, very well. And the villain is awesome as well. Next up, we're going with Doctor Strange. This one, I think it was kind of a meh movie. Not really bad, not necessarily bad, but Doctor Strange was just kind of the introduction into the magic world of the Marvel comics, bringing them into the cinematic universe. Benedict Cumberbatch did a great job. The movie as a whole, though, is just kind of average. The villain is not very memorable. The storyline is honestly not very memorable. It's kind of just a bare, basic origin story movie. It did the origin part very well, but the rest of it is just kind of, I don't remember the rest of it. Good origin, the rest of it's just kind of eh. So that's where I'd place it. I think meh is a fair place to put it. Same thing with Ant-Man, which is the next movie. This one is just kind of it's honestly a worse origin story than Doctor Strange, but it had some funny jokes. It had a funny kind of shtick to it with the whole small superhero thing. He can turn small, he can turn big. It had a fun heist element to it as well. It had some cool action scenes with the whole going smaller on the train set. That scene in particular was really funny. It had the B character as well. I can't remember its name, but I remember that being quite a funny scene when the bee dies. And it's a kind of funny movie, I guess. I'd definitely go meh. That's where I'd put it. Next up, Thor Ragnarok. This movie is going to go into great tier. It kind of brought Thor back from the dead, to be honest. I really liked the first Thor movie. This is obviously way better than it. And the second Thor movie, Thor the Dark World, is like one of the worst movies in the whole MCU. But Thor Ragnarok really brought the character back and made him a much deeper character. It explored a lot to do with his powers. It kind of reimagined what it means to be the god of thunder, not the god of hammers, which is a really funny scene in the movie. And where Thor realizes that, thunder is his bitch. It's his power. He doesn't need a hammer for it. And I thought that was a really cool exploration into the character. Now we've got a banger. We've got Avengers Endgame. This movie is one of the best movies in the MCU. There's no question about it. What are you really going to say against this movie? It closed off an entire 10 years worth of work for the whole MCU. It is the culmination of 10 years worth of work, and it definitely shows. It's got a great little ending to it. Some of our favorite characters die, like Tony Stark, and he has an awesome farewell in the movie with his funeral and his on-battle death. It's the culmination of 10 years worth of work, and it really pays off. And I think it definitely earns its spot as one of the best movies in the MCU. Next up, we've got, this is Spider-Man Homecoming. I would put Spider-Man Homecoming bang average in the middle. It's a good movie. It's a good Spider-Man movie. It plays up the high school Spider-Man a lot more than previous Spider-Man movies have. It brought in a much younger cast than a lot of Spider-Man movies did, and it made it feel a lot more relatable for younger people. I think I felt that especially when I saw it in high school. It's got Tony Stark in it too. It's got Iron Man being a bit of a mentor to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, which was a cool little side plot to it as well. He kind of learns how to use his powers a bit in this movie, and he gets a cool suit. And yeah, I think it's a really good Spider-Man movie overall. Next up, Iron Man. This definitely goes into the best category, and I think I'd honestly put it over Winter Soldier as well. Reason being, it was the beginning of the MCU, and to kick it all off in such a way where it's an awesome action movie, it's an awesome superhero movie, and it blends really mature themes into that kind of genre that wasn't really taken seriously before. Did a really good job. It's also got an awesome soundtrack with all the AC/DC music in it. It's also got Terrence Howard in it, which is hilarious. If you know anything about what he's on these days, it's pretty crazy. So yeah, I think this is a great, it's one of the best movies in the whole MCU, and it's super revisitable. Like, it has a few hints and nods to other things that were to come in the MCU, but it's not overly so like Ant-Man and the Wasp is, or even like Spider-Man Homecoming is. It's just kind of a good standalone movie. It's got Nick Fury in it too, and yeah, definitely one of the best. Speaking of one of the best, we've got the first Avengers movie. Definitely goes in the best tier, I would say. I mean, it was the first time all the Avengers were on screen all together at the same time for the first time. And I mean, how do you beat that? Like, not only did they do it for the first time, but also it could have failed in so many ways, but it just kind of came together really, really well. And it's a super awesome movie to revisit too, because of all the costumes in it are a little bit more, I wouldn't say comic accurate, but a little bit more early days superhero movies. Like, they're not as mature or not as realistic in a way, I would say as well. And it's a super fun fight scene at the end. You get an awesome Thor and Hulk fight scene in it too. Loki is one of the best villains in the whole MCU, so him being the villain of that movie, Tom Hiddleston did a great job, and the whole movie's amazing. Now we got Avengers Age of Ultron. I know I just talked up the first Avengers, but the second Avengers really sucked. I would say it really fucking sucked, and I'd put it in the bad tier. One of the biggest reasons I'd put it in the bad tier is the whole build up to the first Avengers movie and how popular that was and how big of a movie that was and how much money it made at the box office. It really kind of brought in a lot of eyes, and it brought in a lot of eyes from a lot of brands. And that's what the second Avengers brought to the table. They just brought a whole slew of brand deals. The whole movie is like this one big jumbled up ad. I swear there's a lot of Champion product placement in it. I think there's a major car product placement advertisement in the movie as well. I think it might be BMW that Tony Stark drives, or there's definitely a car in there that Tony Stark drives. It's just like, all right, we know that company paid the MCU so much money just to be in the movie. And I think that's one of the things that really annoyed me about it, because it's a serious eyesore. Like, if you rewatch this movie, it's such an eyesore to see all these brands in it, and it's super annoying. Then again, the whole Ultron villain he's cool. Like, AI is a bit more prevalent these days, so it's a bit more relevant today than it was back then. But the AI supervillain is all right. He had a really cool voice, I thought, but other than the voice, he was just kind of average. This movie also brought in Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and Vision as well. Vision was really cool at the end. Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were just kind of all right. I remember Scarlet Witch having a really cool scene towards the end with Hawkeye. That was kind of memorable, but other than that, all I remember is this movie is just a massive advertisement for a bunch of brands, and that was super annoying. Like, I really dislike that. Anyway, Thor, the first Thor movie. I said before, when I put on Thor Ragnarok on the tier list, I said I really liked the first Thor movie, and yeah, I'm going to put this in good tier. I really enjoyed the first Thor movie. It is funny because it strips back everything that we know Thor is. It takes away all his powers and sends him straight down to Earth where he could do fuck all. And he's a bumbling idiot in the movie as well, which is a bit more played out in Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder as well. But in this movie, it's just kind of like a tourist coming to a new country that he doesn't know the rules of, and it's a bit of a funny mashup there. The movie's it stands alone really well as well. It's not like they brought Thor in and then they brought a whole bunch of other characters from other Marvel movies they made back then. I think Iron Man and Captain America were the only movies that were made back then as well, along with Thor. So it's not like they brought all those characters in and just kind of decided to do a mini Avengers. It was just a Thor movie without his powers and him kind of learning what it means to be someone deserving of the position he's in, which I thought was really cool. So, and yeah, I thought it was just a good movie overall. I really enjoy it. There's a lot of a particular camera angle, a Dutch angle. There's a lot of Dutch angles in this movie, And it's really funny. Looking back on it, you can count maybe 20 or 25 of them. I wouldn't go upwards of 30, but there's at least 20 Dutch angles in this movie. And it's a bit, it makes you feel a bit nauseous, but it's kind of a cool artistic trend or whatever they tried to use back then. So that was maybe my only downside to it, the Dutch angles. But other than that, I really like the character of Thor. I really like his kind of coming of age story almost. And Jane Foster and the whole other ensemble in this movie is cool as well. Kat Dennings, awesome. And now we've got Captain Marvel. This is definitely the worst movie in the Infinity Saga. I do not know anyone that would rewatch this movie after seeing it once. I don't know if anyone would put this into their DVD player or press play on streaming with all these other options. Not only that, if you had no other options, I don't think you're playing this movie. Brie Larson is really boring. She's very wooden. She's got the acting range in this movie of a plank of wood. Like, there's nothing to her character in this movie, and she almost shows no emotion through her face. It's like, yeah, looking at a brick wall trying to act. So that was really annoying to look at throughout the whole movie. This movie also has young Sam Jackson in it, because it's supposed to be the first movie, or technically the second movie in the MCU chronological timeline, if you weren't going by release date. And I mean, Sam Jackson's cool, but I don't remember much of this story, to be honest. Yeah, this was just to kind of get her into the end game. And that was about it. That was the whole reason this movie was made. And yeah, not a memorable story. Pretty boring. Bad acting from Brie Larson, unfortunately. I wish it was good, but yeah, nothing good to say about it. Next up, we got the first Captain America. Captain America, the First Avenger. Same as Thor, same as the first Thor movie, these two movies are really similar in that they kind of have that early 2000s superhero vibe to it. Captain America, the First Avenger brought in, obviously, his like most notorious villain as well with Red Skull, and they did it all right. But I think the thing that made this movie really kind of fun for me was early days Steve Rogers before he gets the super serum or whatever they call it. And Bucky Barnes in the movie, I forgot the actor's name, but their pairing and their kind of back and forth is really funny. Agent Carter, I forgot her name. I know her as Agent Carter. I forgot her first name, but she's really cool in the movie as well. Good actress, does a really good job and makes for some really heartfelt scenes towards the end. With Steve Rogers, villain's cool. They're fighting, I think, Nazi Germany in the movie. So that's always fun. You can't go wrong with that, I think. Yeah, it's a fun movie. I think, honestly, if you rewatched it, you'd have a good time. I don't have any complaints about it. So, yeah. Next up, I wanted to talk about Iron Man 2. So Iron Man 2, this is the one where they have Whiplash in the movie, and they've got Warhammer as well. Iron Man 2 is a meh movie, I think. They couldn't really recapture what made Iron Man 1 so good. I think if you like Iron Man 1, you're probably going to like Iron Man 2, but you're definitely going to see that decline from the first movie to the second movie. You're definitely going to see this as one of those sequels that is just not as good as the original. And yeah, I think one of those facts in it is just bringing in Whiplash. He wasn't that memorable of a villain. He has a cool power. I mean, his power is kind of just that he's a good engineer, but he's got a cool weapon, and that's what makes him cool in this movie. This movie also has Elon Musk, which is pretty funny as well. But yeah, other than that, it's just kind of not as good Iron Man 1, Yeah, War Machine's all right, but I don't really remember much of the story. I guess they just have to fight Whiplash. Actually, yeah, it's got a cool meme as well at the start with the whole court scene. I know that's definitely used a lot in meme culture, but yeah, it's just kind of a not as good Iron Man one. Thor: The Dark World. This is one of the worst movies in the MCU, without a doubt. Not as bad as Captain Marvel, but very, very close to it. I would honestly say this movie actually killed the character of Thor. Like, they did not make another Thor movie until 2018. I think it was 2018 when Ragnarok came out. But Thor 2 literally killed him as a character. I think this movie came out in, I want to say 2013. It might have been the first movie after the first Avengers. Or was it before the first Avengers? I don't remember quite well. But yeah, this movie definitely killed the character of Thor. It was super boring. It had one of the worst villains in the whole MCU as well, with those elf things. I can't remember what they were called exactly. Night elves? Something like that. Yeah, and it also had the Reality Stone in it too, which is pretty cool. They killed Loki in this movie and then they brought him back. So it just kind of tells you how, like, the kinds of bad decisions they made with this movie. They killed one of the best villains they had and then they brought him back because they were like, that was a stupid decision. Obviously, we're going to bring him back. Why the fuck would you do that in Thor: The Dark World? One of the worst movies in the MCU, for sure. Iron Man 3. This also goes in meh. I'd definitely put it above the second Iron Man movie, though. I think probably the most annoying part of this movie is the relationship he has with the kid. The kid is a kind of average child actor. And a bit annoying in the film, from what I remember. It was pretty cool to see the house party protocol too, which is what is behind him in that poster, which is where all of the suits are kind of automated and they fly on their own and they do their own thing and fight through AI or something like that. I think it's called the house party protocol. It's a pretty cool scene in the movie, probably one of the best. Also, the villain, I can't remember its name, but he kind of had these fire powers. I don't think they were explained very well from what I remember. Yeah, poor villain. Cool Iron Man movie, definitely better than the second one. Definitely because of what Iron Man does with his powers. Oh, that's the other villain. So Aldrich Killian, that's one of them. No, is that the second one? Now I can't remember. I think it's the third one. Aldrich Killian is the dude with the fire powers. I think that's the third one. Apologies if I'm misremembering. He was just And then the actual cool villain they had in this movie, which they fucked up immensely, was the guy that has the 10 rings. And then they brought him back for Shang-Chi. I can't remember what the villain's called, but an awesome villain. And he was awesome in the trailers. Ben Kingsley did a great job of portraying him. And then it turns out he's an actor in the movie, part of the story. He's just acting, which is crazy that they did that. I don't think I've seen a plot twist in a movie that bad since Iron Man 3. The fact that they made the dude that has the 10 rings an actor is insane. And in all the trailers, he's so menacing and just played really well by Ben Kingsley. And then they decided to fuck him off and turn him into an actor. They brought him back again for Shang-Chi and they, made him a lot better in that movie. But I really liked what Ben Kingsley did with it, and then they kind of fucked it over. So that was really unfortunate. Guardians 2, definitely not as good as the first one. I think it suffers from a lot of the problems Iron Man 2 suffers from, which is literally just trying to live up to the first movie and then falling short, which is really annoying. Still has a great soundtrack, but I remember Ego the Living Planet being the villain of this movie, which is Star-Lord's dad. And I think the reveal it kind of fell flat a little bit, the reveal. And yeah, I think Ego the Living Planet is just not that cool of a villain overall. A living planet is an awesome idea, and I think it was done really well in the comics, but the kind of adaptation they did here, not so much. I think in the comics there's an actual planet with a face on it, which is pretty funny. Maybe they had a scene like that in this movie, but I don't remember really well. Yeah, this is just not as good as the original, and I remember a lot of annoying side plots with Mantis and Drax, which I didn't really care for in the movie. Yeah, I think that's where I have it. Next up, we've got Black Panther, the first Black Panther movie. This movie was fucking awesome. I think Black Panther was like one of those superheroes where it was like, back before they made it, it was like, this would be really cool if they turned it into a movie, but how did they do it? I think they got Ryan Coogler. I think that's the director. I'm not really searching any of this stuff up. I'm just going off the top of my head. I think that's the director of this movie. He did a awesome job with it, bringing in Chadwick Boseman and I forgot Killmonger's actor's name. That's really Michael B. Jordan. Those two as opposing figures in this movie is awesome to see on screen. Michael B. Jordan in particular as well was a really cool villain. I think they fell into that trap of having the villain in the MCU movie being pretty much having the same powers as the hero, but being on the opposite team pretty much, just being a bad version of it, which was a bit annoying. But I think Michael B. Jordan's portrayal as a villain was really cool to see. The whole "Hey Auntie" line is really funny in it as well. I think that was one of my favorite parts of the movie. Definitely seeing them go back and forth. And I think there was a bit of like, hey, look what happened before. I can't remember what it's called. Like, look what happened in the past and how that led to where we are now in this movie between Michael B. Jordan and Chadwick Boseman and their parents. I'm just going to stop talking about that because I don't remember it very well, but I remember really liking this movie. Had an awesome soundtrack in it too. And that's probably one of the things you notice most about the great tier is Guardians, awesome soundtrack. Black Panther, awesome soundtrack. Thor Ragnarok also had a cool soundtrack, I think. Well, it had a lot of 80s rock. Civil War, not so much on the soundtrack side, but yeah, 3 of the 4 movies in the great tier have an awesome soundtrack, and they definitely deserve to be there. Next up, we have Hulk, the Edward Norton Hulk movie. Yes, he was Hulk for one movie, and then they removed him. This movie was cool. It brought probably one of the best versions of Hulk we've ever had. And then the first Avengers took it, made him angry, which was cool, but he was never ferocious like he was in this movie. This movie brought us like the apex predator Hulk. Like, this dude is a fucking killer, and his design in the movie was awesome. Just absolutely fucking yoked and ripped from head to toe. He's huge. I think this is definitely maybe the best design for the Hulk ever. The one they used for the Avengers movie is cool too, but yeah, this one was awesome. It was just kind of, I mean, they recast him for a reason, right? Edward Norton, he did an alright job with what he had to work with the script, but yeah, I mean, they recast him for a reason, and they went with a whole new direction with Hulk for a reason after this movie. Yeah. Anyway, Avengers Infinity War. Yeah, this goes in the best tier. Honestly, the first Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, they're all like the culmination of the end of that phase's work that they did. It really shows how much the MCU grew between the first and the third Avengers movie. And this one, it had definitely top two villains of the whole MCU with Thanos. This movie was really Thanos' movie, and that's what I remember most from the time when this movie was released, and how people were talking about how fucking awesome Thanos is and how cruel he is, but at the same time he has his own weird twisted methods behind the madness and reasoning for what he's doing. He made Thanos almost a relatable character. You could see where Thanos was coming from how they portrayed him in this movie, and I think that's fucking awesome. Yeah, I think he was portrayed really, really well by... I cannot remember the actor's name, but he was portrayed really well. And yeah, a fucking awesome villain. Also, we got the snap, which is one of the most iconic things to ever happen in comic books. And we got a live action adaptation of that in a movie, and they fucking smashed it. Yeah, it's one of the best. Last but not least, we've got Spider-Man Far From Home. That's the one, Spider-Man Far From Home. It's really small. I can't quite see the poster, but it's really annoying what they did with the names. It's like they've all got the word home in it, and it kind of makes it hard to remember. But anyway, I definitely liked the second one with Tom Holland more than the first one. The second one also happens post-Endgame, so this is like the epilogue to the whole Infinity Saga almost. This is like the last movie in the Infinity Saga, I believe. And so Tony Stark is dead. And I think that is actually kind of really good for this movie because it helps Tom Holland stand on his own 2 feet as Spider-Man without the help of Tony Stark, obviously. They do have Tony Stark's sidekick in the movie, though. I can't remember his name. I think it's Jon Favreau that plays him. But other than that, pretty much Tom Holland as Spider-Man standing on his own 2 feet for the first time, which is fucking cool. It also brought in Mysterio, which is one of the coolest Spider-Man villains, I think, as well. Played really well by Jake Gyllenhaal, I think, too. It was really cool to see that scene where you figure out that Jake Gyllenhaal is bad and how he's doing all his hallucinations, or where he's kind of bending reality, but not really. They made it more of a realistic thing versus, I think, what some of the comics have done, which is actually just make him a magical being. But in this movie, they had drones and virtual reality, which I think was really good by itself for this telling of the story of Mysterio. And also the scene at the end where Tom Holland uses his Spidey sense to fight off the drones and figure out where they are was badass as well. Yeah, I think this movie belongs in good tier. I definitely liked it versus the first one, and it's definitely more of an enjoyable watch than everything below it. But yeah, that's my Infinity Saga tier list. That's how I would rate all these movies. I think I could definitely back every reason why I could definitely back my reasoning for every movie I put and why I put them there. I would hope from what I said about each of them that it makes sense for why I've put them in their own tiers and why I've put certain ones above other ones. Yeah, that's my tier list.